Good morning, everyone. Director Walker, are you ready to proceed?
I am.
I just have a couple quick comments for the record. Last night, I received an email from Secretary Richardson that he was unable to attend today's meeting, and so I want to welcome Deputy Secretary of State Leslie Cummings here today. Appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule. Please let Secretary Richardson know that we're thinking of him and wish him a very speedy recovery, and our thoughts and prayers are with him. So, Director Walker.
Thank you, Governor, members of the board. I am going to shorten up our agenda today, giving us more time for informational items, but we will be removing the consent items and the action items from our agenda today and deferring action on those items in December. We've got a lot on our agenda. Before I get to the first informational item,
And Director Walker, just for the record, my recollection is we typically meet the second Tuesday of the month, but in December, we're going to be meeting on the 18th, as I recall.
Correct, Governor. There were scheduling issues, so we are closer to Christmas holiday.
Okay.
So please don't go out of town. We will have a very full agenda in December. So before I get to the first informational item, number 7, I did want to comment on, I'm not getting into the action item on clarification of the Callan report, but I do want to let the public know and you all to know that we have posted to our website the Common School Fund distribution one-pager, and also the Common School Fund distribution to PERS under Senate Bill 1566. That is a DOJ-approved document. Thank you, Mr. DeVore. And thank you to my fiscal staff. So if anyone is curious about those distributions, they are on our website.
And I want to say thank you to your team for your hard work on this and appreciate the DOJ's Department of Justice rapid assist to make sure we got these questions answered. So thank you.
Yes, thank you, Governor. All right, well, we're going to step right into agenda item 7 then, which is the trust property report for fiscal year 2016 and 2017. Somehow 2016 got overlooked, so we're going to give you a twofer today. The trust property unit is part of the administration division, and it manages the unclaimed property and escheated estates program. And for those of you who are not lawyers, an escheated estate is one where the owner dies intestate or without a will, and the property reverts to the state because there's no owners. So this is my public service plug. Please have a will. Otherwise, we will have to dispose of your property, and it may not be in the manner you wish. The Oregon unclaimed property statutes date back to 1957, so a year after I was born. Originally, it was a 25-year escheat law only applicable to financial institutions, but over the past 58 years, wow, the statutes have changed significantly, and they're now applicable to every type of industry and include a wide variety of property types. These things are held in perpetuity for the rightful owner or owner's heirs, but not the items. We sell the items, and then we hold the cash in perpetuity. The law requires businesses and organizations called holders, that's their fancy name, to report and remit certain tangible and intangible property to the state when the owner of that property cannot be located after they've tried for a certain period of time. So every year it's very busy here between October 1 and November 1. So you are here in the busy time where holders report and remit unclaimed property to the Department of State Lands. Under Oregon's Constitution, the department manages the estates, and without the department then acts as a personal representative for those people who have died intestate without a will and any known heirs. By statute, anyone with knowledge of the death of a resident individual who has died without a will or known heirs must notify the department within 48 hours. So we get a lot of notifications from funeral homes when they don't have anyone to claim the deceased. Within 5 days after notification, our department must respond to the estate to determine the existence and value of the assets and to safeguard them against loss. We want to protect those assets, not only for any heirs that may come forward, but for the state. A physical search is performed of the residence, and I've been on one of those, and they can be interesting. It made me want to go home and clean my house and sort through all the boxes. If an heir or a will is located, the estate is then turned over to the appropriate person or entity. Property of the estate, both real estate and personal, is liquidated by public auction. We have those twice a year, but we also have other auctions throughout the year. If we have, for instance, one of the properties I went to, they had 3 boats and several cars, so all those items would be sold. The remaining funds, a sheet, or transfer to the common school fund where they're held for a period of not more than 10 years. Now, if it's unclaimed property, we hold your money forever. If it's estate property, we only hold your money for 10 years. So that's another reason to have a will, because at the end of that 10-year period, it transfers or sheets to the common school fund. Millions of dollars pass through the estates program each year, and large amounts are reunited with their rightful owners. The charts in Appendix A and B show the growth of the trust property receipts. In fiscal year 2016, trust property receipts were $68 million. That was an all-time high, but in 2017, we dropped back down to $59 million. The difference in those two is that we had some securities that we were selling, and we were backlogged on selling those securities. We don't sell them at fire sale prices. We have a broker that works with us on getting a good price. So we're now back down to our regular level of around 59 or 60 million. There's approximately 600 million currently total in the fund. It's, so there are several activities my staff does, and it's an impressive list. It's on the website. It's in front of you. I don't have time to go through all of them, but I will tell you that Asheated Estates staff opened 596 new cases in fiscal year 2016 and 908 cases in 2017. And we are on track to surpass that in 2018. So that's a lot of folks that die without a will. Refunds increased to $25.4 million in 2016 and $27.7 million in 2017. So we've been pretty busy trying to give people their money back. Our goals, we're trying to develop a more robust online reporting tool that allows the reporters to upload report files or create their report online for free. We offer seminars around the state. We offer online webinars. We're going to be doing that soon. Trust Property continues to analyze unclaimed property processes or procedures to make owner outreach more effective and more timely. And the largest compliance issue is that stakeholders are not aware of their responsibilities. So it's a constant education with the stakeholders, and our team is very active in doing that outreach. And holders who report in multiple states, for instance, let's just take one of the large banking institutions. They are in multiple states, and the laws are different in each state. So we're trying to find more efficient ways to make our laws uniform with the other states and make it easier for them. Trust Property has also participated in the Oregon Vital Elements registration system called OVERS, and that's sponsored by the Oregon Health Authority of all places. The system provides additional research tools to allow us to quickly determine if there are living heirs. We also plan in the next year to develop a simple estates reporting tool. So we've got a lot going on in that section. I do want to give you an update on where we are in the conversation of potentially moving unclaimed property to Treasury. When I was hired here, I was asked to review the department with an eye towards the core mission and efficient operations. In addition to the ongoing work here at DSL, of which there is plenty, and no, Governor, I am not bored yet. I told her when I was hired I didn't want to be bored, and she assured me I would not be, and I am not. So I was specifically asked by you all to address three main issues: decoupling of the Elliott State Forest and management of the Habitat Conservation Plan, exploring options to find a new funding source or ownership of the South Slough National Estuarine Research Reserve in Charleston, and I'll give you an update about that a little bit later, and investigate whether unclaimed property should continue to reside at state lands or if there is a more appropriate agency that would better align with the mission of unclaimed property. Since my time began in March, we have researched the history of the program and looked to other states for best practices. In June, I attended the National Association of Unclaimed Property Administrators Conference with our Deputy for Administrative Services, Gene Strait. That is held in connection with the National State Treasurers Conference, so the treasurer and his staff were there. Gene was hired at DSL 1 week before I arrived, so both of us have an eye towards building efficiency in our operations and breaking down our silos. Our research has found that only one other state has unclaimed property programs housed in their Department of State lands: North Dakota. So North Dakota and I had a little chat. They have 5 land board members, by the way. And then there are a handful of others that are located in their revenue agency, their comptroller's office, and one each in the state auditor and one in the state attorney general's office. I don't know why, but the vast majority of them are with the treasurer. We've been talking to Treasurer Reed's staff to explore what would need to happen for a successful agency transition. Conversations have been taking place with interested stakeholders and staff in both agencies. We believe that we have a viable legislative concept to move forward with in the 2019 session. We look forward to sharing that with you before the December meeting, so we can hopefully get support from you at the December meeting on that concept.
Director Walker, just a quick, what I will be looking for as we make any kind of structural decisions like that is, I've been really impressed, frankly, with the department's ability to deliver in terms of outcomes regarding unclaimed property. And I'd love to kind of see how that compares to if the conversation is to move to the straight Treasury Department, if the treasurers across the states have better outcomes than we do at the department, or if they're relatively consistent. I'll just be curious to see kind of what their timelines are, what the percentage of return rate is, all of those pieces. That will be something that I would look for.
Okay. Duly noted. Thank you, Governor.
Treasurer Reed.
Thank you, Governor. I just want to say thanks to the Director for following through on our interest in figuring out these questions of how to be most efficient and effective. I think it is a good observation you made, Governor, about how a lot of the infrastructure that's associated with this work resides with the Association of State Treasurers. So if there is a move, that gives us a chance to take advantage of those best practices and that kind of collaboration. In my view, the priority should remain efficiency, bringing more money into the Common School Fund, and reuniting it with Oregonians who own it. If things proceed, we're certainly comfortable taking that on and working with the experienced staff at DSL. But for me, the priority I think is really clear about bringing more money into the Common School Fund and getting it reunited with the people who own it.
And Governor and Treasurer Reed, to be fair to my staff, they do a tremendous job, and I know you recognize that. They do a tremendous job. I just don't have enough of them. We could double the staff and increase our outreach, but with what we have, they're constantly working, and we've tried to simplify things by bringing online systems in order and learn from other states. But from the conversation that Gene and I had with many folks at that conference, we do believe it's well suited to a treasurer's office. Certainly not with the AG's office, so Matt, you can stop breaking out in a sweat.
Thank you.
All right, we will go to agenda item 8, which is an update on Goble. Oh, this was something I inherited, and in August 2018, the Department of State Lands determined the waterway cleanup on the Columbia River in Goble was complete. Almost $12 million later, unfortunately, but the cleanup began in June 2017 and removed 10 vessels, including the River Queen, from the site. Overall, 617 tons of solid waste, 209 tons of hazardous waste, and 114 tons of liquid waste, and 933 tons of recyclable steel were removed. That all was a potential hazard to our waterway, so it is gone. Cleanup costs to date are $11.2 million. We anticipate final numbers to come in closer to 12. The increase was over our original estimate, and the increase is primarily due to the derelict condition of the River Queen and the additional precautions that were necessitated to ensure removal of the boat so that it wouldn't pollute the waterway. Off-site disassembly and disposal of the River Queen is still in process. The Goble site on the Columbia is now in its original condition. Multiple DSL efforts are underway to protect state-owned waterways from future damaging and costly cleanups, including a legislative concept that will allow DSL to develop a pool of money to acquire a state-owned insurance policy and fund future cleanups, developing a program and plan for removal of abandoned and derelict vessels from state-owned waterways, increasing site visits. And this was my bring to the table, Vicki bring this one to the table from my previous experience, is increasing site visits to our leaseholders to help identify potential problems and address them early, and to improve relations with our leaseholders. So we'll be rotating, 3-year rotating basis, we'll be out visiting our leaseholders. It's a little bit of a push for the staff, but they're committed. We put a lot of time into getting their input, but I think it's very important for us to understand what our leaseholders need and whether they're meeting their objectives under the lease, and that we're properly covered so that we don't have another Goble. We also want to apply existing DSL authority to require more robust bonds or other financial security measures in leases. We're exploring options for creating an interest-bearing fund to assist the state in future cleanups, and we're working, this is really cool, we're working with British Columbia, Alaska, Washington, and California on a task force that will ultimately provide a blue ribbon program for strategically addressing issues with abandoned and derelict vessels, because we are not the only state with this problem. So I'm very pleased with my staff, and I'm very grateful to everyone for getting this cleaned up. Do you have any questions?
Treasurer Reed.
Thank you, Governor. I do have a question. I'd like to hear more about that regional approach and what the early conversations have revealed.
Patricia Fox on our staff has been tasked to that task force. I learned about others that were interested when I was at the Western State Land Commissioners meeting in Duluth, Minnesota.
Just for the record, Duluth, Minnesota is not Western Lands.
You know, when I first joined here at State Lands, it was my objection that we're called the Western State Land Commissioners because I don't consider those states Western states. They're Midwestern states.
Yes, correct.
So we're actually, there's a small group in the association is looking at changing our name. So yes, Arkansas is in the list, and Texas.
Historically Western.
They're not Western states. So anyway, others were concerned about it. I spoke with the Alaska State Land Director, And so I asked Patricia to come in and give me a briefing one day, and she brought this humongous spreadsheet. I've never seen a spreadsheet so big in my life. I really didn't need glasses to read it. It was huge, and they have tasks all listed down here in each state, what they're doing, and they fill in the spreadsheet, and they have schedules. They have a schedule to get things done by certain dates and provide this blue ribbon option to states soon. So I'm really excited about it.
This experience with Gobel makes me pretty intrigued by the idea of pooling in terms of insurance and other security approaches. So appreciate that work.
And I'll just add, we work with British Columbia, Washington, and California through the Pacific Coast Collaborative, which has been our primarily environmental collaboration, but we're also starting to tackle some other issues, including the opioid health crisis. But it would make sense to put this particular issue on the agenda of that group as well. I know it doesn't include Alaska, but we could certainly invite them on occasion. So.
I appreciate those comments because it is the one vexing problem we have here that's really irritated me because I don't see a quick solution. I've been working on it, but we have a lot of derelict vessels and transient boats, and it's really a problem. And I send emails to our attorney all the time saying, could we try this? And he gets back to me, no, but we could maybe try this. So we're working on all kinds of things. It is a priority of mine especially. So thank you for those pieces of advice. So we will move to agenda item 9, the Chetco pilot filled lands update. At the June 12th, 2018 Land Board meeting, the board directed the department to determine whether any interest remains vested in the state of Oregon with respect to historically filled lands on the Chetco River in Curry County. The department completed an initial review of historically filled lands for the Chetco, and that's in Appendix A. The initial review found a total of approximately 4 acres of filled land in 2 different locations within the Port of Brookings Harbor Marina. Both fill events occurred on or after May 28, 1963, and are therefore not considered historically filled land. So in addition, the fill material for the 2 fill events were placed on tidelands that were previously conveyed to upland owners. So since that initial review revealed no historically filled lands, the department plans to suspend any further study or procedures with respect to the Chetco River from River Mile 0 to River Mile 11. So all those homeowners can breathe a sigh of relief. We are not going to talk to them any further. The department has been allocated 2 limited duration positions by the legislature to complete the work that was required under Senate Bill 912 passed in 2015. The legislature asked us to do this. It was a huge project, and Governor, as you mentioned the other day, Chris Castelli on our staff was very much involved in that. The department, we just can't keep hiring limited duration people. They go away. They look for permanent jobs. We train them, they're gone in 6 months. Our last person just left, so we're taking a different approach. You all approved that in our budget request. We're going to outsource the mapping portion of the project, and then we will, once we get the mapping done, then our staff will be able to go out and interface with residents in Oregon who are impacted. We need to get this done before 2025, so that's our best option on the table, is to outsource that. I do like to not outsource when I can, but obviously it's beyond our capacity here, so that's what we're doing next. Any questions? All right, well, we're going to move to the star of the day, I think, the Oregon Consensus Report. I'll ask Mr. Peter Harkema to come on up to the table with me, and I'll make some opening comments and turn it over to you. I was saying this morning I love Land Board Day because everybody's dressed in their Sunday best. So,
including us.
nice to see you in a suit. We've had many, many meetings on this topic, and trust me, your department has taken your direction seriously about decoupling and the Habitat Conservation Plan. And these folks have really been a tremendous asset to us. So let me just give a brief update of what you asked us to do so the public can have their minds refreshed. At the May 9, 2017 meeting, the Land Board directed the department to move forward with a public option for the Elliott State Forest that 1, advances public ownership of the Elliott, 2, decouples the forest from the Common School Fund, either through a trust land transfer or other financial means, 3, continues habitat conservation planning to protect species and allow for harvest off the forest, and 4, further researches Treasurer Reed's concept, which he'll elucidate on later in this discussion. That is directly from our minutes, so you all approve those minutes, you all approve that direction. The department received $1.5 million in funding in the 2017 legislative session to pursue the decoupling and the HCP. As reported previously, a contractor was hired and the HCP process is underway, and we are thrilled with our contractor. They're doing a tremendous job. On January 2, 2018, the department signed an intergovernmental agreement, an IGA, with Oregon Consensus, a public policy mediation program based in the Hatfield School of Government at Portland State University, to independently conduct stakeholder interviews to inform development of a process and framework for decoupling. The IGA with Oregon Consensus includes 3 phases. Phase 1, establishing working principles and foundational elements for the project, an overall project management plan, including communications and an approach to stakeholder engagement. This phase was duly completed in March of 2017, just as I came on board. Check the box. Phase 2, developing a resolution framework, conducting interviews and focus groups and with people representing a variety of interest groups to assess key issues and determine the degree of current common ground, and producing a summary report of the findings that will inform phase 3 work. That's my Vanna White interpretation. The estimated completion date on that is today. Phase 3, convening an advisory group to develop recommendations for decoupling the Elliott State Forest from the Common School Fund. Using phase 2 findings, the group will explore issues needing further resolution and develop a report for consideration by the Department of State Lands and the State Land Board. Estimated completion date on phase 3 is spring of 2019. So we will commence with that once I have direction and we hear from Oregon Consensus. Oregon Consensus has completed stakeholder interviews regarding decoupling the Elliott State Forest from the Common School Fund and submitted their final report to the department. This, of course, completes phase 2, and Peter will be discussing that here in a moment. The report has been available on the department's website since October 9. Paper copies are available upon request. I believe we have some out on the table. The department invites the public to read the final report and provide feedback on the report's findings. Feedback will be accepted on our website or by postal mail until 5 p.m. on Thursday, November 15. And what that feedback is your opinion, the public's opinion about the report. The report is what it is. It will not change, but this is gathering the public's input on what they think the report presented to us and what their opinions are, because we value the public's opinion. The department will provide a summary of the comments received to the board prior to the December 11 meeting so that you all, well, that's now the December 18 meeting, so that you all can have a chance to review those comments before you make any decisions in December. So at this time, before I wrap up and sort of pose the questions about what we need to do going forward, I'm going to turn it over to Peter Harkema to give us an overview and talk about this wonderful report that they've spent how many months working on?
A number of months.
A number of months. All right, there you go. It's all yours.
Thank you, Director Walker, for your introduction. Governor Brown, Deputy Secretary Cummings, and Treasurer Reed, thank you for the opportunity to briefly review the findings of the Oregon Consensus Assessment of Interest related to decoupling of the Elliott State Forest from the Common School Fund. For the record, I'm Peter Harkema, the Director of the Oregon Consensus Program. And prior to beginning my remarks, I'd like to thank the agency, tribal, and stakeholder interests that took time to engage in the interviews for this assessment. I'd also like to thank your assistants for their time and engagement in this process. And finally, Director Walker, also you and your staff for your time and engagement. Much appreciated. As well as my teammates, Brett Brownscombe and Amy Delahanty, who were members of the Oregon Consensus Assessment team. As Director Walker mentioned, Oregon Consensus is the state of Oregon's legislatively established program for public policy dispute resolution. We're based at Portland State in the Hatfield School of Government and really exist as a neutral entity to help Oregonians in solving complicated and challenging issues, much like the Elliott. During and following the Land Board's decision in May of 2017 to move forward with public ownership for the Elliott, there was considerable discussion about an advisory process to help determine next steps for the forest. Then DSL Director Paul reached out to Oregon Consensus for our advice and on potential resources and considerations related to such a process. Given the tensions related to the board's decision, the differing interests and perspectives on the Elliott, and questions over what exactly an advisory group would do, we suggested that an assessment prior to launching any sort of advisory group might be helpful. The assessment allowed for a neutral exploration of the issues and interests relevant to a potential decoupling effort, and for parties and perspectives to inform the process and framework for moving forward. This is what's captured in the report in front of you. The assessment and the resulting report is a compilation of 46 interviews with more than 70 people. And while we were not able to interview everyone who has an interest in the Elliott, you know there are many, every effort was made to ensure that the interviewees represented the diversity of perspectives on the Elliott. And it's worth noting that the report doesn't and really wasn't intended to answer the question of the future of the Elliott. Rather, it compiles and distills the many perspectives, the challenges and opportunities into a single and we hope readable document that can narrow the focus of issues, options for parties and yourselves as the decision makers to consider as you work to determine the forest's future. By way of context, let me just very briefly orient you to the overall structure of the report, which begins with an explanation of the Oregon Consensus Assessment process. This is followed by a synthesis of information that was gathered from the interviewees. That's in sections 2 and 4. And finally, the last section focuses on process recommendations for addressing decoupling of the Elliott State Forest from the Common School Fund. There are a number of topics I'd like to take just that bear consideration, but I'd like to take just a couple of minutes to highlight a few of those that seem both timely and relevant for today. The first arises on page 14 in a section called Land Board Assumptions. This section is based on reviewing of past Land Board member statements and actions, as well as a number of conversations with your assistants. In this section, our team has attempted to describe the board's current areas of common ground. We think that land board verification and any necessary clarification of these assumptions is needed in order to focus the future decision space by clarifying what appears to be the board's current direction as it relates to the Elliott. This will provide a crucial foundation for the future work on decoupling, including any potential advisory group. The assumptions are described in detail in the report, and I won't go through them in great detail, but they do include the following elements: common school fund responsibility, complete decoupling, public ownership and access, conservation values, working forest features, workforce and local community benefit, and tribal engagement. The second area where near-term direction from the board may be helpful to the future is the future public ownership topic. Many facets of this are described in detail in the report. However, for today's purposes, we wish to highlight just simply the fact that a number of parties described a potential interest in taking on an ownership role for the Elliott. Although we didn't hear that any party was ready to come forward with a full proposal right now. So whether parties are interested, meaning that they don't want to be left out of any future conversations related to the Elliott's future, or whether they are working to put together a full proposal that advances ownership interests in the Elliott remains less than clear. Although it is worth noting that, consistent with the framework provided to the board in April 2017, Oregon State University is currently examining ownership and management considerations related to the forest. Given the board's sense of urgency in reaching an outcome on the Elliott, the report suggests it's important in the near term to clarify the range of entities that would actively pursue potential ownership through a decoupling path. On page 28 of the report, we have described one possible approach for doing so through input to PSL. I'd also want to note today that the assumptions and the process recommendations sections of the report speak to a number of additional topics that bear consideration and need future clarification as you determine next steps for decoupling. These include board clarification related to the use of the $100 million in bonding and the relationship between a potential decoupling effort and the habitat conservation planning effort for the forest. And to conclude my remarks today, I want to leave you with a message of optimism, I suppose tinged with a bit of realism, which is only fitting for the Elliott. And to do so, I'd like to just paraphrase from the report a bit in our conclusion. And really it's to say that the Elliott is a really special place, and it's valued by Oregonians. And it's symbolic of many other conversations, and for some, it's become the epicenter of broader conversations around public land, tribal sovereignty, habitat, jobs and economic opportunities, and deep cultural and historic ties to the land. The affinity that people feel for this forest makes finding a solution to the present situation a difficult proposition. And finding a solution to the Elliott will require strong leadership. Leadership that can overcome a lack of trust, boldly clarify areas of uncertainty, and provide clear direction and a vision for the future. The challenge in finding a solution lies in identifying a space that is sufficiently acceptable to the varied interests, but it also is likely that no solution will satisfy everyone. There are those that would prefer that no compromises are made. Yet, among those, and here's the optimism, right? Among those that we interviewed, there was a persistent theme of practicality and, for many, optimism that now is the time to resolve the issues that have long challenged the Elliott. With that, I'd be happy to take any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Peter. Treasurer Reed.
Thank you, Governor. I'm not sure I have specific questions. I would echo what others have already said in appreciating the work that you did. Those of us who've spent time on this issue, I think, all have the experience of understanding how deep and complex and layered all of the history and issues that are here are, and having taken on similar tasks in terms of trying to reflect widely varied opinions and perspectives in a single document. I salute you for that effort. That's no small or easy thing.
Deputy Secretary Cummings.
So I'm encouraged by the Oregon Consensus Report and look forward to continuing this collaborative process. Specifically, I agree with the assumptions in Section 3 of the report and will carefully consider any plan that meets that criteria. I also look forward to hearing from the public on their priorities and what they would like to see in the Elliott Forest. So thank you again for your hard work. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Deputy Secretary. Thank you, Peter, and to your team. I know Brett is here. I don't see Amy in the audience. You guys have done a really great job putting together what I would consider a very comprehensive report. Oh, she is there. Oh, there you are. Okay. You were being blocked. Thank you. I think for me, the report really clarifies how stakeholders view the Elliott, and clearly there are a lot of different views depending upon the lens through which people are looking. And it's my sense that the report maps out a relatively narrow range of options in front of us. I know that there are a number of public entities that are interested in the Elliott. I expect we will hear in December if any of them are prepared and able to help keep the forest public, but also decouple the remainder of the forest from the Common School Fund while keeping the fund whole. I know that we have one of the world's best forestry schools here in Oregon, Oregon State University, and I thought they presented a really compelling case at a previous land board meeting. Dean Manis, as I recall, presented a very compelling vision at that time for how we move forward. I just have to say his leadership at Oregon State University will be very much missed, and on behalf of the state of Oregon, I want to pass on our sympathies to the Manis family. I look forward to hearing how that work has continued to develop, and appreciate very much your work at Oregon Solutions, and certainly appreciate the comments of my colleagues, of which I actually agree. So thank you.
Governor, can I add a couple
Sure,
of things?
sure.
When you asked before, I was confining to questions, so
Okay,
my
all right.
apologies. I want to echo what both of you have already said. I think the assumptions particularly are a good summary of the discussion we've had to date. One thing I think that was included, but maybe, at least for me, deserves a little more weight, is the concept of research that's mentioned briefly under the working forest features. But for me, that was one of the real key elements of my interest in connecting Oregon State University to this effort. And if I might be so bold as to suggest one possible route for us, I'd like to invite OSU to come before us in December and present the status update, a progress report on their work. We put a lot on them in our discussions up till now. My understanding is they've been working very hard along the lines of the memorandum of understanding that we concluded to assess the viability of their acquisition of the forest. So I'd like to hear about that. I think you're also right that there are others, as the report dictates, that have expressed some level of interest, but in the interest of, as the report also notes, the urgency, the timeliness of all this, I might suggest that we ask those who have been substantively, who've been working on something that's substantively new with specifics, including funding, might reach out to the director, and she might have the ability to determine if any of those are sufficiently new and sufficiently viable to come before us in December. But in the interest of kind of continuing the momentum we're trying to establish, I would suggest that might be a way for us to proceed.
Okay, thank you. Any comments?
Yes, I'm open to OSU and any other entity who would present consistent with the report. So
Great.
Thank you.
Great. I'd certainly add my support to have the OSU forestry program come present in December, and I would certainly ask the public if there are I think, as the treasurer mentioned, we're trying to narrow options, not expand options, but if there are other public entities that are prepared, they should contact Director Walker, and we can proceed as appropriate depending upon what the proposals look like. But I would expect that we would hear from OSU Forestry Department, the second best in the entire world, so.
I thank you, Governor, and members of the board. I appreciate the conversation, and I have already been in touch with Oregon State University. They came to me early on, and we've provided them with information that is public information, so that they can do their data analysis to see if this is feasible. They established a committee to review the process, and they're now at this point near the end of that, and I believe they're sharing it with their colleagues and with the dean and the president of the university, and make some decisions from there. We've also asked them if they'd like to participate at one of our Habitat Conservation Plan meetings with the federal agencies, and we tried to get that squared away for November, but it wasn't possible, so we'll work on that for December. I've also had conversations with others who have expressed interest, but nothing has come out sort of vetted and ready to go. And so I appreciate hearing the board's ability and willingness to have anyone come forward and contact me if they need to do that. I'm also hearing from the board, I didn't need a motion from you. I just needed to hear confirmation that you thought the assumptions were appropriate. I did hear that, so good job, Oregon Consensus, on getting that right. So page 14 of this document speaks to the board's pleasure at this point. I think the only other thing that I wanted to get some understanding about is whether you all still support the idea of going forward with phase 3. I don't need a motion, I just need some direction, because the department is the one that implemented that IGA with Oregon Consensus, and phase 3 is developing that advisory group to make recommendations. And if that is something that you're still all interested in doing, and I will tell you that OSU expressed an interest in wanting to have an advisory group, I think that conversation would need to occur in December in terms of your guidance about how you would like to establish that committee, what is the criteria to determine who would be appointed to that committee, how long they would serve, that sort of thing. So I guess if I'm getting a feeling that the advisory process is still something you're interested in, we can flesh that out a little bit more in December. I'm getting nods of the heads.
I'm fine with proceeding in that manner. I think we've
Yes.
got nods on.
As am I.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay.
But I just want to point out that December is going to likely to be a fairly lengthy meeting.
Oh, yeah.
So for our audience members, you might want to bring a snack or a sandwich. And for our board members, you might want to make sure you eat ahead of time or prepared, so.
Yes, Governor, especially since we postponed some items to the December agenda, and I already knew December was going to be long, and I'm coveting your wrap at the moment because it's freezing in here. So I'm going to see if we can get the heat turned up next time around, but we'll have more bodies and probably keep us all warm.
Yeah.
All right, well, if you have no other questions of Peter or myself on that subject, we'll move on to item 11. Thank you.
Again, thank you,
Thank you.
Oregon Consensus, Peter, Brett, and Amy. Sorry I didn't see you there. Thank you.
And Amy wrote a number of sentences in this conclusion that just sing. I love sentences that sing, and so I was very excited, and I said, who wrote that? And it was Amy, so thank you, Amy. The rest of the report's good, but I love singing sentences.
Okay.
There's something about writing that is awesome. Okay, number 11. All right, so this is the update on the request for information that we sent out for the forest management update. So as reported to the board in a May 9, 2017 memorandum by the former director, Jim Paul, approximately 118,000 acres of trust lands, or 15%, are currently not generating positive revenues for the Common School Fund. It is estimated these acres make up about 60% of the total asset value of the Common School Fund trust lands. Most of these acres, 82,500 to be exact, comprise the Elliott State Forest that we just heard about, and which up until the close of fiscal year 17 was managed by the Oregon Department of Forestry. Titan Kelly currently manages the Elliott under contract, providing forest road maintenance, tree planting services, refuse removal and disposal, general forest land management, including wildfire prevention, detection, and notification to Coos Fire Protection Association for fire suppression. So Titan Kelly doesn't do the firefighting. They just manage it and get folks there that can handle that. And they also manage the pesky youngsters that go out there and decide to have a little fun and cut trees down, which they did recently. Timber harvest has ceased on the Elliott while the department engages in the decoupling and the HCP process. So the forest stands tall and no revenue is coming in. Approximately 33,000 acres of our forest lands are managed by the Department of Forestry. They're also referred to as certified forest lands. The remaining 2,500 acres are known as non-certified forest lands, and they're managed by us. Though at present, the department does not have a forester to perform this function, so again, those trees stand tall and look lovely. The department has struggled for months to hire a forester to work with our contractor on the Elliott because it takes time, and one of our staffers in the Bend office is doing all that work. And we also need a forester to help provide guidance on management of our other timberlands. We have engaged, we are going out for another strategy recruitment strategy, so we hope to have someone hired soon. We're reaching out to associations and universities. The department and ODF engaged in some spirited conversation in May and June of 2018 regarding our current management contract and fees. We worked through these issues with the help of our fiscal analysts to solve the discrepancies in the budget, and the board approved the ODF budget at the June 12 meeting. At that same meeting, the department recommended proceeding with a request for information from the vendor community to see if there were other entities who could provide forest management at lower cost. The RFI was posted on July 31 on the Oregon Procurement Information Network, known as ORPIN, and closed August 16. 36 companies downloaded the RFI, but only one responded. And it really wasn't too responsive to what we needed. Disappointed in the outcome, the department asked our intern from Oregon State University School of Public Policy, Angela Patricia Lovato Alvarado. Now that sings. That's a lovely name. She conducted interviews and provided an analysis of the results. Angela's work tells us that 44% of the companies indicated the RFI was outside their range of services, so you kind of wonder why they downloaded it, but maybe they determined that after they downloaded it. 28% said they didn't have enough time to complete the document, though 72% said the time was adequate, so there you go. 11% indicated they do not respond to RFIs, 78% considered the information sufficient to provide answers, and 56% would not have responded even if it had been a request for proposal, yet 44% would have responded if it had been an RFP. For now, the department will continue with its management agreement with Oregon Department of Forestry. Once we have a forester on board, the department will once again examine our options in light of Goal 2 in our strategic plan. to develop a forest lands management strategy for currently underperforming forest lands, review and assess forest operations on actively managed forest lands to ensure proper management, and to pursue active management of decertified or currently underperforming forest lands to gain revenue from timber or other resources. As part of the department's exploration to evaluate options for management of the common school forest lands, our intern was asked to conduct an analysis of the land classes of properties adjacent to the department's wide-ranging forest lands across 18 counties. The properties are classified by land management class, title holder, and land manager. And you can see that study in Exhibit A, Appendix A. I am actually thrilled with this piece of the study. This tells us who owns the property next to us. It tells us who we can reach out to if we're interested in selling property. The Department of Forestry, Oregon Department of Forestry, indicated at one of our early meetings that they're interested in swapping some land with us that is adjacent to theirs. So this analysis gives us that working platform to start that conversation. And we may once again, go out with an RFP, a request for proposal, and break down the sort of places that we want someone to manage the forest. Our RFI was for all 33,000 acres. We may break that down and do it by region. But we'll have that conversation once we get a forester and we've had more conversations with ODF. So I'm thrilled about that aspect, and I hope that you are as well.
Comments or questions? I have David Gold signed up from the North Bend School District to testify. Did you wish to testify today? Come on up. Thank you and welcome.
I've been working with Jim Paul.
I just need you to identify your name for the record, please.
I represent North Bend School District. We have 43,000 acres in the LA Forest to the school district. I'm really concerned about this decoupling. I'm in favor of the Oregon State. I think that's wonderful. But when you decouple it, you take the value from the children. You're not giving them anything for it. And this forest can be managed just like you want to do, but you can, like if you had a rock pit, you can have royalty or something. In other words, they need to pay a percentage of this forever to the common school fund. Otherwise, it's a take. And I've gone to show them a lot of lines, and I've talked to a lot of attorneys, and I've tried to get you and the attorney general about it, and that's impossible. And I'm going to try to talk to this man over here if he will talk to me. But I see what's going on, and I just am against decoupling for. And I talked to Ed Gray 4 years ago about trying to do this, and he said we can't do that. So I'm in favor of this. I'll let you know that, but not decoupling.
All right. Thank you very much for joining us today. Any further comments on item 11? Deputy Secretary, go ahead.
I'd just like to thank Director Walker, that recognition that you need to improve current approach on the 35.5 acres and excuse me, miscellaneous forest lands and the common school fund that are not currently generating revenue, and your efforts on this project to explore improvement opportunities. And I would like to support that you do a request for a proposal for managed lease or purchase individual parcels of these lands, especially with the 44% that said they didn't respond without the RFP. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes. Okay. All right. I think we're good on this
Okay.
particular item.
Great. All right. Now we get to the fun ones. It's all fun, but this is what I look forward to, especially. Item 12 is other, and under other I take liberal license. So the first item that we have is, and hopefully we have some staff in the room because I'm going to be asking them to stand up when I'm done. All DSL staff, all department staff, attended one or more sessions of a biennial diversity training organized by the agency's Multicultural Awareness Committee, otherwise known as the MAC. The trainings were held in Salem on September 25th and 26th, and they are held pursuant to an executive order from the governor's office. The MAC committee partnered with a variety of organizations to put together an agenda focusing on issues of concern in our community. Partner organizations this year included Marion Polk Peer Coalition, Basic Rights Oregon, and the Oregon Department of Education. Topics presented were mental illness, substance abuse, and homelessness. There was a panel discussion with member organizations from the Marion Polk Peer Coalition, and it was just awesome to hear from them. LGBTQ issues in Oregon schools. This seminar provided a basic understanding of the work that is happening in the schools related to LGBTQ youth, socially and emotionally. Transgender and gender non-conforming individuals. This workshop was designed to assist individuals and organizations with building a more affirming environment for trans coworkers and clients and bridging the gap between legal and truly lived equality at their workplaces. And it concluded with Pacifica Dancers Dance Troupe at the conclusion of the training. So at this time, I have to tell you, the committees that our staff are involved in, they take time. Sometimes I think they have second thoughts. Did I really sign up for this? But they did, and they did a tremendous job. And I want to recognize the committee members. If you would just stand as I call your name. Nancy Liable is the chair.
She's not here today.
Okay. Beth Vergara, HR sponsor and secretary. I see you, Beth. Thank you. Jennifer Schaffner is our HR sponsor, and she's out today. Catherine Andreessen is from our South Slough office. Gary Curtis is from Bend. He's the Common School Fund representative. He's not here. Trisha Adelig. Trisha, are you here? She's in the back hiding. Melissa Pelton. Melissa, yay. Blake Helm.
He's not here.
Okay. Chris Castelli, man of the hour, and Tammy Palmer. Tammy?
Great.
They're in the back. I want to give these people a hand because they've done a great job. And I want to thank you, Governor, for issuing the executive order. I was told that we've done this for years anyway, but your executive order is also an opportunity for us to refresh what we do. And I heard lots of great comments about this. So I want to move into the next one. We have 3 items. So number 2 and number 3 is going to be the South Slough, Steve. So number 2 is a recognition of some other staff. And they are here under false pretenses, but that's okay. I had to get them here. In 2002, the department initiated a process to inventory its rangeland properties. I knew I'd give it away then, to obtain baseline data for decisions relating to livestock grazing operations and other necessary management decisions on its state-owned rangelands. The annual target was to complete 30,000 acres a year with a final completion date of 2022. Well, guess what? We're at 2018 and they are done. Yay! Yay! A total of just under 490,000 acres of rangeland data inventory has now been completed on state-owned rangelands. And Randy, I don't think we crossed all 490,000 acres when we were out this summer. How many? Close? I know it was a long, long trip in that vehicle. These inventoried lands encompass the larger blocks of state-owned land primarily suitable for livestock grazing. However, these lands are also considered important habitat for wildlife, especially for sage grouse. Department staff critical to this data collection effort, and we're going to bring you up to get pictures, so hold your seats, include rangeland lead Randy Wiest and rangeland manager Sheena Miltenberger. Randy began his career at DSL kicking off this inventory effort, and Sheena joined us in 2007 as lead for the seasonal range technician crews. DSL also partnered with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to provide protection and initiation of conservation measures by development of candidate conservation agreements with assurances for protection of sage grouse on state-owned land. Both Randy and Sheena were instrumental in the completion of this effort, as well as being previously recognized by the Land Board in 2015. So here they are again doing great work, like many of my staff. Over the next year, staff will begin the task of compiling a report to summarize the data collected for a determination of habitat condition and overall ecosystem stability. An honorable mention for other staff that contributed to this effort: Amber Ross, who works on the Elliott for us, Max Falgren, and Mike Shamaisky. I had to phonetically do that. So a big hand to these folks, and then I want to bring them up, Governor, if I can, and present a certificate and get a picture with you.
Of course.
All right. And I want to thank their manager, Nancy Pustis, who manages the Bend office, for doing such a great job with these people.
I should come on in.
Come on up. We're going to give you a certificate.
Well done.
This is your first time.
Thank you so much for your hard work. Again, you guys go that way. Perfect.
Okay. All right.
Other than the two tall guys here, I'm like, here, this is what we're gonna do. I'm not gonna do this.
All right.
Thank you. Okay.
So I didn't do the fibbing, so there you go. My children have always said I don't keep a very good secret because I don't know how to lie. So
That's good.
good job. All right, so to finish off our conversation today, as I mentioned, there were 3 things y'all asked me to do when I got hired, and oh boy, that's a lot of stuff. So the third one, and that's in addition to all the other work that we do here, which is a lot. The other issue was to look at transferring ownership or management of the South Slough National Estuarine Research Reserve in Charleston. So let me just give you a tiny update, and I plan to give you a greater update as we move along, because we've just really started the conversation. I've done some homework, but we had some conversation recently, and I'll talk about that. I was really pleased that I could rely on Matt DeVore, our esteemed attorney, assistant attorney general counsel, and he says I don't need to call him that, but he is esteemed and he does provide great work. So I'm going to give you a little background. The South Slough was designated in 1974 as the first unit of the National Estuarine Research Reserve System. Federal funds, state funds, and private donations were used to acquire the land. Since 1977, the South Slough has been managed by the South Slough Management Commission under the umbrella of DSL, and I am the chair of that commission. The boundaries of the reserve were set by statute. In 1997, the legislature amended the definition of, quote, school lands to include lands in the SNR. That's what we call that. South Slough is SNR. Since then, DSL has acquired other nearby and adjacent parcels of land through grants and donations. As a common school fund asset, DSL may use funds in the common school fund to pay for management of the SNR. I don't like that word. We're going to call that South Slough. Currently, those costs are about $1 million per year or $2 million per biennium from us. The total costs are about 2 million a year or 4 million a biennium. And the federal grants comprise the rest of it. I will tell you that I had my fiscal staff this morning, because I had this epiphany last night. I should probably check on this. This morning they ran the numbers, and we have, over the past 4 years, the South SLU staff has done such a tremendous job going after grants that we are now, 56% of the budget at the South SLU is coming from federal grants, and 44% is now coming from the Common School Fund. So the trend is up for increasing that federal contribution. Since 2011, so this has been a while, the department has been ruminating about divesting of the South SLU while still maintaining the purposes for which it was created. The most recent iteration of those discussions resulted in a cooperative agreement between the department, the U of O, and OSU in 2016 to engage in work group conversation that continued into 2017. I found this in the file. Those discussions identified the interests that motivated both universities and indicated that the 2019 session, at the earliest, would be the time to effectuate any potential legislative action. I'm not sure we can even keep that pace of 2019, but I'm going to try. But I need to re-engage with some of the parties. So let me continue, and then we can talk about that. The department has recently re-engaged in discussions with the University of Oregon and will soon be reaching out to Oregon State University, though they may have their hands full with the Elliott. So I sort of had left them alone. We waited on the conversation to begin because the U of O is going through strategic planning and said that September would be a better month for them to have this conversation, which is why we haven't done it sooner. We met with them, met with our council, and several issues still are all over the table that need to be resolved. I've requested meetings with the 3 coastal tribes that serve on the commission. There's an alternating tribal seat on the commission, though in my research I did find that the Siletz have never served on the commission, so they will be the next to serve once Chief Brainerd's position has completed.
And Director Walker, just for the record, the 3 tribes are Siletz, Coos, and Coquille.
Yes, excuse me, thank you for clarifying that. I've also involved the South SLU manager, Bree Yednock, in this conversation, and she has now started to reach out to NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, because NOAA is an integral partner and funding source for the South SLU, and NOAA has to give permission for any change to the management plan. So I've sort of capsulized the issues that we need to explore. This is not an exhaustive list, but these were off the top of my head last night at midnight when I was working on this. NOAA approval is required for any major changes to the management plan. Number 2, by federal law, the reserve must be, quote, under adequate state control, unquote, for the long-term protection of the reserve. So a sale of the reserve is problematic. Number 3, if the approximately 6,000 acre reserve were sold, it would have to be sold at appraised values to maximize the financial return to the Common School Fund from any sale of South SLU lands. Some lands were acquired by donations and may come with deed restrictions. I found a deed in the file, actually. Number 4, can the legislature remove the South SLU from the Common School Fund? Or more precisely, does the legislature have an appetite to do so because they're the ones that put it into the Common School Fund? And that's where the nuances come in and the work to have conversations that get us anywhere on that, which is why I'm not sure we can resolve this in 2019, but I'm committed. If the department were to reach an agreement with OSU or the U of O for management of the reserve, such a plan would be needed. We would need to reconcile that with statutes that Mr. DeVore outlined for us. and there are plenty, and a determination would need to be made about what role the legislatively created South SLU Management Commission would have under any change in management. And number 6, likewise, a management and funding arrangement would need to be brokered with one or both universities, and a governance model would need to be created. So if both universities were involved, you couldn't have both universities managing. That just won't work. So one person, one entity would have to be delegated as the manager, and the other would be a cooperator or whatever. We have not worked that through yet. So for now, the department will continue to work on this project and provide a more vetted plan in the coming months. But my first step, or my next step, is the outreach to Oregon State, because U of O is busy working on the projects and assignments we gave them a couple weeks ago, and then the outreach to the tribes. And I've already heard back from the Slets about setting up a meeting, and I'm hoping to meet with the Confederated Cruise Tribes and the Coquel in November when I'm down there for an event that the Confederated Cruise Tribes are putting on for state agencies. So that's all I can tell you at the moment. I'm sorry I've not gotten any further on that, but I've had a lot to do, and it's going to require some engagement with some stakeholders.
Director Walker, I think what would be useful for me is to have a better understanding of why the legislature put this where it did to begin with, and I can't remember the year you said, early 70s sometime. And so maybe a brief analysis of legislative history, or to have a better sense of why this was placed where it was.
Well, I can tell you, Governor, that our council has opined that it is possible the legislature did that to assure funding, so that it wasn't in the general fund. But I think an analysis of the legislative history. But
this is a great project for some student
it is,
to help us out
and
with.
I see Matt grabbing the microphone. Do you want to correct me on that?
Governor, by placing it into the Common School Fund, it could allow the management to use income to the Common School Fund for the perpetual management of the South SLU. So it was a way for the...
I'm sure it's just like what we did, frankly, in terms of managing the Capitol grounds and putting that in the Park and Parks Department. So I don't think it's had the intended financial impact that we would like it to have. So, but I'd love to have some more history on this. So.
Well, and I'm with you, Governor. I love legislative history, and so I'm going to try to find an intern or do it myself, because I'm fascinated by it, and I need to understand what the arguments were back in 1970. I believe it was 1977, and then again in 1993 or whenever that was, 1997, 1977 and 1997.
Okay.
Were two big moments. And then, of course, when it was created. And it was created when I graduated high school, which is no wonder I never went to the South SLU, because I left town.
I think there's some also really other interesting opportunities as we are fully funding outdoor school for our middles. It's 5th graders and 6th graders. Is there an opportunity to weave that together, in terms of the work that's happening around career and technical education and hands-on learning? Is there a way to weave that together? I'm not suggesting folks at the Department of Ed that you all take on the financial responsibility, but can we find some interesting partnerships here that would ensure better access for Oregonians and educational opportunity for more of our students?
Governor, your point is so spot on, because a big part of what the South SLU does is education, and I think I mentioned before, thousands of kids have gone through there. They have a teacher education program, which is, why I don't have so much heartburn, because it is education of children, but it is money going out and no revenue coming back in. But your idea about the partnerships is what tells me that this is going to take a little bit of time, because I think we need to strategically look at those partnerships and expand that conversation besides just outsourcing it to the universities.
And the other piece is that with Senate Bill 13 and a integration of tribal curriculum into our K through 12 system, is there a way to do that, at least on the South Coast, in a more hands-on opportunity? So I just think there's some really interesting partnerships that could happen with this particular project. So,
And I agree with you that this is a gem in the SNR network, in the NER network, the National Estuarine Network. I mean, it is, our management plan has been called out as being one of the best. It was the first one in the network. What they do for the environment, for habitat, for climate change, they've got, you know, monitoring stations, and for the education of the kids is just absolutely tremendous. So it is a gem that is well loved, and so how we can better find a way to fund that is my project.
great. Treasurer Reed, Deputy Secretary Cummings, any last comments?
I was just going to say I support you and would hope that maybe there's others, public entities or tribes that would be a better fit for management of that as well. So thank you.
Thank you. All right. Any other business?
We are done.
Thank you.
Governor?
On that very happy note, the October 16th Land Board meeting is hereby adjourned. Thank you all very much for joining us.